The officer barked orders, his voice sharp. "Get out of the chair, now." The man didn't flinch. Calm, steady, he simply replied, "I can't." That answer seemed to set the cop off. The taser crackled, then the man dropped, gasping, his service medals glinting faintly in the sunlight. When backup arrived, one officer froze. "Wait, Commander James Holt." The cop's face went pale. The suspect he'd just assaulted wasn't some random man, he was a decorated Navy SEAL commander, hero of 2 overseas missions. Within minutes, the police chief was on site. Cameras rolling. The department's PR nightmare had begun. And as Commander Holt slowly raised his head, he said quietly, "You should have checked who you were aiming at before pulling the trigger." The scene outside the convenience store turned chaotic. Reporters arrived, flashing cameras capturing the officer's trembling hands as his chief whispered furiously, "You just tased a war hero." Commander Holt stayed silent, his gaze cold and steady. Paramedics checked him, but he waved them off. "I've taken worse hits in Afghanistan," he muttered. The chief turned to apologize, but Holt's lawyer was already there, a tall black woman in a sharp navy suit. "Save it for the court," she said. "You'll be hearing from the Department of Defense by morning." By nightfall, bodycam footage was all over the news. The internet erupted, #JusticeForCommander Holt trending everywhere. The officer who pulled the trigger was suspended instantly, his badge stripped on live TV. As the sun set, Holt finally broke his silence. Looking straight into the camera, he said, "I didn't fight for freedom overseas just to be treated like an enemy at home." The next morning, the entire town buzzed with disbelief. News vans lined the street outside the police station. Commander Holt's name was now on every major outlet, from CNN to Fox, decorated Navy SEAL commander tased by officer during routine stop. Inside the station, chaos reigned. The officer who'd pulled the trigger sat pale and shaking, head buried in his hands. "I didn't know who he was," he whispered. The chief glared. "You didn't need to know who he was. You just needed to follow the law." At that moment, the heavy door swung open. Commander Holt entered, calm, composed, dressed in his full uniform, medals gleaming under the fluorescent lights. The entire room went silent. Even the officers who once mocked him stood at attention. He walked right up to the chief and said, "I'm not here for revenge, I'm here to make sure this never happens to anyone again." The chief nodded. "Then let's start by cleaning house." Within hours, 3 officers were suspended, new training orders were issued, and the town realized, the man they humiliated was now rewriting the very rules they abused. Weeks passed, but the echoes of that night still shook the department. Commander Holt was invited to Washington, D.C., to meet with the Secretary of Defense. Cameras flashed as he walked up the marble steps, his wheelchair gliding with quiet authority. The same man once seen as just another suspect, was now standing before the nation's highest officials. At the press conference, Holt's voice was steady. "This isn't just about me. It's about every person who's been silenced, profiled, or mistreated because someone didn't look past their own bias." The room erupted in applause. Back in his hometown, the officer who tased him watched the broadcast from his suspension hearing. Tears welled in his eyes. For the first time, he understood the weight of what he'd done. When Holt returned, he didn't come with anger, he came with change. He was sworn in as the new head of community reform for the state police. Standing before a line of recruits, he said quietly, "The badge doesn't give you power over others, it gives you the duty to protect them." The same streets where he once bled now carried his message, justice, discipline, and respect. Months later, the department underwent the biggest transformation in its history. Every officer was required to attend Holt's new, Human First, training program, a course built on empathy, accountability, and real-world crisis response. Many came in skeptical, but they left changed. During one session, Holt wheeled up beside a young recruit and asked, "What's the first thing you see when you look at me?" The recruit hesitated. "A veteran, sir." Holt smiled faintly. "Good. Remember that, always see the person first." News of his work spread nationwide. Communities that once feared law enforcement began to rebuild trust. Mothers who used to warn their sons about police now spoke of hope again. When Holt was later honored at a veterans memorial, the same officer who had once tased him stood in the crowd, head bowed. After the ceremony, he approached quietly. "Sir, I'll never undo what I did. But because of you, I'll never let it happen again." Holt placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then that's where change begins." The camera zoomed out, a decorated SEAL commander, a reformed officer, and a nation finally learning what true justice looks like.